welcome on this Sunday. Lots of sun here, and I think around the country too, to enjoy. And not just that physical sun that's out there in the world, but the sun and the light that we hold in our hearts that connects us and draws us together as we recognize the teachings of unity and the power that's in the messages and the support that is for us in our daily lives and in our spiritual lives. So important, so profound. And particularly for our service today, we give thanks for Paul and Nancy, who are our speakers that are taking part this afternoon, and for their energy that they bring and share with each one of us. So we're going to light our Christ candle now. If you have a candle that you'd like to light, please do so. And this light is symbolic, of course. These lights that we see in the world around us are temporary, they come and go, but the light in us is constant, always shining, always here to be experienced, to be felt, to be known. So we take a moment to acknowledge the light that we see with our physical eyes in the candles, and also the light that we hold in our hearts and we recognize in each other. So recognizing that Christ light, that eternal light that is always shining, let's use the words of our opening affirmation and prayer to help us call forth and recognize that light that is shining. So I invite you to join me in reading the invocation together. I am now in the presence of pure being, immersed in the Holy Spirit of life, love, and wisdom. I acknowledge God's presence and power, which through divine wisdom within me erases my mortal limitations and brings forth that pure substance of love into our world through us all, according to God's perfect law. So as we hold the silence for a moment, we acknowledge the presence and the power, the activity of God's life, love, and wisdom that we feel into, that we express, that we share, that we witness in the world, in each other, and call forth for all those whom we hold in prayer and in our hearts, that they know too that infinite life, love, and wisdom within them. Let's take a moment to hold that knowing in the silence.
When I pray, I feel my heart go deeper, my heart go deeper into my God. When I pray, I feel my heart go deeper, my heart go deeper into my God. Right here, right now, right where I am, I pray. Right here, right now, right where I am, I pray.
And that lovely song leads us nicely into our daily word for Sunday, the 21st of July. And our word is valuable. The affirmation is, as a divine being, I am valuable and irreplaceable. Doesn't that sound wonderful to know? Please repeat the affirmation with me. As a divine being, I am valuable and irreplaceable. And this message is for each one of us. Each person is a spiritual being, made in the image and likeness of God, blessed with a variety of spiritual gifts we share in different ways. The world needs my unique contributions. When I see myself this way, I become newly aware of my value as a member of the human family, more confident in myself as I shine the light of God as only I can. Living in the awareness of my value helps others see it too. I leave behind critical or negative opinions I may have held about myself and treat myself as the divine being I am. Like a beautiful gemstone, I too am a precious jewel among so many others. Together, we sparkle and shine. And our scripture reading is from Genesis chapter 1, verse 27. So God created humankind in his image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. So let's take these words of encouragement and confidence into a few moments of silence.
So first of all, thank you, Nancy, for doing that daily word so beautifully. And thank you for Kimerie for choosing the opening music and the first two songs. Now, normally when I do talks, I talk about daily word, but I'm not going to today. I'm going to talk about basically our last retreat. We had a wonderful retreat, and we talked about the Beatitudes. I think the Beatitudes, a bit like the Ten Commandments, I guess. Everyone's heard of them. And I suspect most people could probably recite 2 or 3 of them. But I suspect we'd all struggle to do all 8 of them. So I'd like to have a look at them today. But in starting to look at them, my immediate question is, well, where did they come from? Why are they there? I mean, they're in the Sermon on the Mount. To an extent, they're also in the Sermon on the Plain, but mainly they're in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5. And I think to understand why they came about, we have to understand a little bit about Jesus. Now, we all know Jesus was a Jew. He was brought up as a devout Jew. And that meant he was brought up in the culture of following the Torah, the first five books of the Hebrew Scriptures. Although there's a lot of evidence to suggest that his personal favorite was actually Isaiah, not the Torah at all. I mean, for those who are aware, the Isaiah was about 4 different things that were redacted together. But the bit apparently he liked was the latter parts of it, because before the exile, the Jews were all full of themselves. Life's great, it's all wonderful. But then we get the exile and think, well, what happened? We've fallen out of favor with God. And actually what they learned during that period, what's reflected in those latter parts of Isaiah, is humility. They learned humility. And that seems to be a lot of what Jesus was about. Because going back to the Torah, I mean, we've got these 613 rules. Interesting, I was looking at them, and I mentioned this on the retreat. One of them is you're not allowed to have tattoos. So given the proclivity for them these days, I'm not sure how young Jews get on these days, that they're not supposed to have tattoos, but anyway, that's by the point. So we've got the 613 rules and we've got the 10 commandments. So as far as the Jewish leadership at the time was concerned, the whole point was to follow these rules. If you followed the rules, life was great. But my understanding of what Jesus was saying was, well, that's all fine. But actually, it's more than that. He talked about, and Eric Butterworth talks about it in this respect. What he talked about was transforming, not conforming. And we see in Romans 12, it says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds, so that you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. Be transformed by the renewing of your minds. So what Jesus was talking about wasn't what to do, it was what to be. And this is the important thing. So we read in John 4, 23 to 24. It says, and this is reportedly Jesus speaking, but the hour is coming and is now here when the true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For the Father seeks such as these to worship him. I'm not sure I'd go along with the latter bit about worshipping him, that's by the by. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth. God is spirit. God is spirit. And we're all children of God. If we're children, we inherit all the traits of God. So if God is spirit, we are spirit. Now, also, in the Sermon on the Mount, he went back to talking about his upbringing in terms of all these laws. And a lot of you will recognize this. It says, do not think that I have come to abolish the law of the prophets. I have come not to abolish, but to fulfill. And he goes on, basically says none of that is going to be done away with. And he ends that little section with, for I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. That state we want to get into. And it's interesting that he interpreted things differently. I mean, you could take one of the commandments, for instance, and it goes on to say, and this is again quoting Jesus, you have heard that it was said to those of ancient times, you shall not murder. We would all recognize that as one of the commandments. You shall not murder. And whoever murders shall be liable to judgment. But I say to you that if you are angry with a brother or sister, you'll be liable to judgment. And if you insult a brother or sister, you'll be liable to the council. And if you say you fool, you'll be liable to the hell of fire. Well, I think it's unlikely personally that he actually said something quite as adamant as that. But what he was saying, it's not so much about what we do. It's about the underlying motivation. It's about what sits behind it. It's about what we feel. It's about the spirit within. Right? It's about consciousness, not the act. And so he came up. Those quotes I just gave you were from later in chapter 5 of Matthew, actually, which is the same chapter in which we get the Beatitudes. And the chapter opens with the Beatitudes. And Eric Butterworth says we should interpret them as be attitudes. 2 words, be attitudes, attitudes of being. And although on the workshop we spent a whole weekend going through the Beatitudes, I'd like to look at them briefly, but before we get into them, they all start with blessed are something or other. And what does that mean? What does it mean to be blessed? Actually, on the retreat, I invited people to go into a breakout room and think about it and think about what they thought it meant. But it means things like freedom, peace, allowing, as we'd often say in unity, letting go and letting God, invoking good, the absolute, and in Revealing Word, the book we use for metaphysical interpretation, joy, to be blessed. But think about all those things. They're all kind of feelings, aren't they? They're all a state of being. To be blessed, then, is to be in a state of being. It's a state of being at one. Let's have a quick look at some of these Beatitudes. Interestingly, the first one, and I should mention that a lot of what I'm talking about is drawn from either Fox's book, The Sermon on the Mount, or Butterworth's Discover the Power Within You, both of which do wonderful accounts and interpretations of these Beatitudes. But the first one is, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And we just talked about actually God being spirit and being the spirit within me. Equally interesting, over the millennia, this beatitude has often been interpreted as blessed are the poor. Doesn't mean that at all. Doesn't mean it's blessed to be poor. Spirit, according to Revealing Word, is God as the moving force in the universe. And I don't want to be poor in that. I want to be rich in it. But what it means here is the spirit that we tend to be in our day-to-day life, being strident, going to our intellect, doing all these things because we believe in our ego selves that it's the thing to do. So actually being poor in spirit means being poor in pride, to be humble, humility, that thing that Jesus loved in the writings of Isaiah. Fox says, empty yourself of all desire to exercise personal self-will. I let go and let God. So this blessing is about learning to live from our divinity. The second beatitude, which for reasons most you'll understand has been important to me over the last few weeks, it says, blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. And why is that the case? Well, our tendency in life is to get into a way of living, get into keeping things as they are, getting into a rut, getting into a spiritual rut. So we actually need something to break us out of that. We need something to challenge us. And so we find these challenges, we find these things like troubles, sufferings of various sort. And we're not just talking about mourning someone's death here. It's anything that we can mourn, anything that we miss. For instance, a job, a friend we might lose. We might go through a divorce, might move house, change a religious practice, even go on a diet. We mourn the things that we lose. And of course, we were sent, as it tells us in the Bible, the Comforter, the Holy Spirit, to support us through all this sort of thing. And John tells us, then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And the truth is the absolute, the divine within us, that oneness, the meaning of unity. So we get that comfort. When we turn within, whatever the challenges, whatever we're missing, when we turn within, we find that comfort. And that comfort leads to freedom. Freedom from the thoughts that produced the grief. And I can tell you it works. We then get one that's very famous. I suspect most people remember this one. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Well, that's another strange one, isn't it? Blessed are the meek. What does it mean to be meek? When we talk about inheriting the earth metaphysically, we talk about exercising power over our own life experience. We have that. It's one of our 12 powers. We often refer to it as dominion. We control our own thought processes, so we control our own experience. But to be meek means to be open-minded, to let go of intellectual control and allow that power of God to flow through us, as us, thereby generating the best life experience we can get, but it requires faith. When we talk about Jesus as our way shower, he was the prime example of this. He was strong. He was a strong person, absolutely. We can read all sorts of things in the Bible about that, but always he would stop, look up, turn to the Father, and ask for guidance. So even though he was strong, he was humble. And that's the example of being meek. Being meek means to have a great inner strength, the strength to actually open ourselves up. Blessed are they that hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. To really hunger after something is important. No athlete, they're just going up to the Olympics. We've had the Euros, we've had Wimbledon. Those people that win because they have a thirst for it. They have the drive for it. People often use an example of when someone's drowning, they thirst for air. This is the passion, this is the drive with which we have to seek righteousness. And of course, righteousness is just right thinking, a state of harmony in consciousness. And when we truly seek this, when we open ourselves to it, we will be filled with the love and grace of God. We will find that Christ within. But it must be an overriding passion. As when Jesus asked the fishermen to give up their lives and follow him. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Eric Butterworth wrote a fabulous book called In the Flow of Life. This is a quote from Eric. If you want to be loved, you must love. If you want friends, you must be friendly. If you want just treatment, be just. Life is lived from within out. He calls it the concentric perspective. He also wrote a book called that as well, which actually I'm reading at the moment. You see, whatever we experience has to flow through us. That is our life experience. It has to flow through us. We have to give it out in order to receive it. A basic metaphysical principle. And so, if we want mercy, we have to be merciful. Because if I am merciful, then I feel mercy. Mercy flows through me. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Well-known quote from Hamlet. There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. There is nothing good or bad. It's our thinking that makes it so. And to be pure in heart means to see with God consciousness the Christ. And if we can do that, then we will experience the divine. So seeing in this case isn't with the eyes, it's seeing with our inner eye, realizing, seeing with real eyes. That's what seeing God is. God isn't physical. These eyes aren't relevant. It's what we feel inside. It's that experience. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they should be called the children of God. It's part of the reason I love that song. I love this thing about being children of God. Peace is that harmony and tranquility, and the child of God is one that inherits all of God's traits. And then it's up to us to realize them in our lives. But how do we become peacemakers? Well, generally through prayer and meditation. And Emmett Fox says in his book, the word prayer should be understood as including any form of communion or attempted communion with God, our inner connection, whether vocal or purely mental. It includes both affirmative and invocatory prayer, each of which is good in its own place. Meditation, and the highest of all forms of prayer, which is contemplation. Becoming that child of God, aligning with our divinity. So the blessing is when I actively turn to God, I find peace, that peace that passeth all understanding. I realize I am one in the sonship, and my being, God's traits. The final one, both Fox and Butterworth say that if we understand this final beatitude, then we really understand the fundamentals of consciousness. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Why on earth is it blessed to be persecuted? Righteousness, we said, is that state of harmony in the kingdom of heaven, which is what we get, is that realm of perfection. that realm of being one, that Christ consciousness. But what is persecution? It's a feeling. It's a feeling. To give some other examples, see, when we come to prosperity, we talk a lot about prosperity and unity, but see, if I feel prosperous, I am prosperous. If I feel afraid, I am afraid. So if I feel persecuted, I am persecuted. And what I feel in this case is a choice I've made in my consciousness. See, different people can experience the same thing, but actually their inner experience is different. You know, you see this with children. A child can go along quite happily, falls over and suddenly bawling the place down. Another child will go over and fall over and get it grinning all over their face, you know, completely different. It's the same with feeling persecuted. It's something we generate internally. And that's why this is perhaps hard to get our head around. The persecution comes from within. So actually, in reality, I am both the persecutor and the persecuted because I'm creating it. And the realization of that is the real blessing because I can choose my life experience. Jesus knew this. And in 1 John, it tells us, greater is he that is within you than he that is in the world. Turning within is always the answer. What goes on out there in the world is just stuff. When we turn within, we find the peace, we find our divinity. Now, it's sort of interesting going through all of those things, but actually, if you noticed in my explanations, they were all basically the same. So what Jesus was doing was just giving examples of the fact that the answer is to turn within. It's to turn within to our divinity, to get into a state of consciousness, a state of being. It's something that I've just been talking about the last 3 weeks in metaphysics classes. And that's great, but it's a journey. This isn't something that happens overnight. This journey to finding the Christ within, it is a journey. So we need the law in the meantime. And that's why Jesus said he's not come to overturn the law. We need that guidance in the meantime. We need that support and help. So the title I chose for this was Being My Truth. So frankly, I need to be my truth. I need to be my truth. That is the whole message of the Beatitudes. And it comes back to daily word. I said I wasn't going to talk about a daily word, but, you know, I am a divine being. I am valuable. I am irreplaceable. And it all comes from that light. The Bible reading was from Genesis. Genesis started out, you know, in the beginning there was the light. Not the light that shines from the sun or anything, the light within, that creative light. The word, the logos. That's what it's all about, getting back to that.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for putting the time into that review of the Beatitudes and how blessed each one of us are by each of you as you show up. And you are unity in this country as you each show up and take part and join in and bring your energy. You are sharing that energy in the world, and the light of you grows and the light of unity grows. So bless you for that. So we move into our closing song, as always, the peace song, and this version played by Dorothy Kirkman, sung by the group at Unity Maidenhead many years ago when we used to meet at Boyne Hill. Do sing along, enjoy the song.
Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin.
yes, there's quite a few voices in that song that some of us will recognize from our days of gathering together in Boyne Hill. But let's take that energy, that peace, that love, that unity, that family that we are, that is God expressing through all of us as the light, as the love, as the power, as the goodness, and speak our prayer for protection together. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. And so it is. Amen. So again, thank you, Paul. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, each one of you, for showing up and being present this afternoon. Have a delightful rest of the day and know that you are the light and you shine beautifully. Thank you for sharing your light with us.